No matter where you moor your boat to keep it safe in a hurricane, you need to reduce the stress high-speed winds will put on your boat. But how? By reducing windage. I'm Carolyn Sherlock, and on this episode of the Boat Galley Podcast, I'll share everything you must remove or lash down on your boat when a hurricane is predicted to hit. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Lunatech, makers of the hydration spray bottle, an odor-free dishcloth, and self-cleaning washcloth. Lunatech offers practical gear designed to save water and reduce waste. A water bottle that doubles as a hose? A dishcloth that doesn't get stinky? Yes, please. Visit lunatechgear.com to learn more, and then use Boat Galley to save 10% on everything. Lunatech, innovative gear for your outdoor adventures. Okay, so let's talk about reducing windage. Whether your boat is at anchor, on a mooring, tied in the mangroves, at a dock, or even hauled out, reducing windage is key to lessening the stress on the boat itself and also on its attachment points. Even at anchor or on a mooring, the boat almost never lies perfectly head to wind. At a dock, tied to mangroves, or in a boatyard for a hurricane, you can almost guarantee it won't be pointing directly into the wind. The smaller the profile of the boat, the less area for the wind to hit and bat it around. That puts less stress on the rig overall, heals the boat less, because heeling and rolling can really add to the wear on items or just flat out break things. It reduces the chafe on line and reduces the load on the anchor, the dock, the mooring, or anything else the boat's attached to. Now, I've talked before about the importance of removing roller furling jibs due to their tendency to unroll and actually cause the boat to sail. But it's also important to remove other sails, that is for sailboats, of course, and everything that can be taken off the deck of the boat. A bonus is that you're less likely to break or lose the items themselves. Now, the same advice applies if you're storing your boat for hurricane season. You have to fully prep it before leaving it. Don't count on someone else to do it once a storm threatens. Every year, I hear stories of how the person who was watching the boat just didn't have time to fully prep all the boats they were watching. Do it yourself before you leave. Having a mainsail on a boom is typically 4 to 5 times as large as just the boom. If you feel that you have to leave it on the boom, at least tightly lash it down to reduce both the size and minimize the damage to it. Yes, stack packs are harder to remove, but they also have more windage than a traditional sail cover. Now, dodgers and biminis also create significant windage. While hard ones can't be removed, canvas ones should. It's a reason they should be attached to frames with zippers. The original ones on our first cruising boat didn't have zippers, and we had them altered after just one bout of hurricane prep where we had to dismantle all the framing to get them off. During Hurricane Marty, some people left dodgers on to give them protection while on watch in the cockpit. Some of those who did had significant damage to the canvas. If you will not be on board during the storm, there's no reason to leave any canvas on. Dinghies have both considerable windage and can act as mini sails to catch the wind. If at all possible to store them below deck or in a secure building ashore, do so. Davits are not a good choice. A dinghy that catches wind really adds to the windage, can break davits, and it can rain harder than any drain hole can allow water to escape. If you have to store an inflatable dinghy on deck, deflate it and then tie it down extremely securely. Wind will get under it and try to rip it loose, causing the big boat to yaw more and quite possibly damage the dinghy. Hard dinghies can be sunk, but be careful with burying them, as boats may be motoring semi out of control if they're anchor dragged or they are trying to avoid a boat that is dragging. Now, dinghy motors should be removed and stored as if for passage. Again, below deck or securely ashore is great, but often the only choice is on the stern rail. Cockpit cushions, of course, should be brought below, before the first rain hits. Now then there's flags, burgees, and decorations. They should all come down well ahead of the storm. They'll be destroyed, yes, and they do add a bit of windage, and every inch counts. Any removable lights, such as Lucy lights, Davis lights, other cockpit lights, need to come down. Again, it's every little item adding windage, and since they'll be destroyed if they're left out in a hurricane, why not? Propane tanks that are not in a propane locker and fuel jerrys are best left outside for safety reasons, but we set them down into the cockpit and tie them down. Keep the area that you would steer from clear in case you have to motor during a storm. That is, of course, if you're going to be aboard. Water jerrys should be brought inside. Solar panels. That's a tough one. It would be best to remove them, but that's not always practical. In Hurricane Marty, we left ours on. 4 each over the Dodger were attached with 4 rail clamps, 2 larger ones on the stern rail with 2 rail clamps each. Those, we just folded them down and tied them securely with several independent lines so that if one chafed through, the others would take up the load. Now, you can do that when you're going to be weather vaning into the wind, that is like on a mooring ball or on an anchor. If you are potentially going to be sideways to the storm, to the winds, you need to try to get those solar panels down so that they are not a flat surface, making for a huge amount of windage. Our current boat, we had a very large panel attached to the dinghy davits. We actually left it in place through a Category 4 storm, but the whole reason was because we were leaving so soon before the storm. We wanted to keep the batteries topped up to keep the bilge pumps able to go if necessary. We fully expected to lose it. Somehow or other we didn't. We don't exactly know how. For safety gear, we've always taken in things like our horseshoe buoy, our man overboard pole. Even if you're on the boat, the unfortunate reality is that if someone were to go overboard in a storm, the gear is unlikely to be of any practical use in storm conditions, in hurricane conditions. It adds windage, it's likely to be torn off the boat, and otherwise destroyed in high winds. Just keep it safe. Deck brushes, boat hooks, other deck gear should all be placed in your lazarette or otherwise brought inside. And canvas covers for your jerry cans, hatches, winches, and so on should all be removed. With these, it's not so much the windage as the fact that they're likely to be destroyed. Now, every boat's different as to what's on deck. Take a walk around your deck and see what all could be removed. A swim ladder, a cockpit table, an outboard crane, kayak or paddleboard, those are huge, a radar reflector, a cockpit table, grill, a whisker pole or spinnaker pole. Add them all to your hurricane prep checklist. And finally, take photos of your fully prepped boat. Should you have significant damage, photos showing an extremely well-prepared boat will go a long ways towards an insurance claim. Thank you for listening to the Boat Galley Podcast today. I hope you found it helpful. Make sure that you never miss an episode. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app.